What is up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? It's your boy Goblin, and today we're coming in with a hoot and a holler of a video. Hope you guys enjoy this one. Drop a like if you do. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And also, we have got brand new merch available now at Goblin420.com. The War on Drugs design is now on shirts and hoodies, and we've got tons of other new stuff for December. Go and head over to Goblin420.com right now and check it out. Thank you guys for the love on that. Thank you for the support. And without further ado, well, actually, there is a little bit of further ado. Let's take a moment for our sponsor. This video is brought to you guys by MyBookie. Cryptocurrency is the future, so don't get left in the past. By going to MyBookie, you can use your cryptocurrency, and by using code GOBLIN, you can actually double your first deposit at MyBookie. The best part is MyBookie accepts all the well-known cryptos like Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, and you can withdraw crypto as well. The playoffs are around the corner for the NFL, so you want to make sure you head over to MyBookie and get ready to rumble. By using code GOBLIN, when you sign up, you can double your first deposit up to $1,000. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie. Big shout out to them. Let's dive right into the video. So this is kind of I guess you could call this a story, but I don't really know what you would call this. But either way, this is a banger of a video. And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics at the moment. My tweaker neighbors. Now listen. I had a brief period as a kid where I also grew up with tweaker neighbors. We're talking about both sets of them. We're talking about the childhood tweakers, and we're talking about the modern day tweakers that I live next to now, because they are both just an event, right? But I feel that my conditioning as a child living next to tweakers probably helped me handle the tweakers today, you know? So to give you guys a little bit of backstory on that, when I was a kid, I lived with my mom, and my mom had just gotten a divorce, right? She had primary custody of me, and we lived in a pretty small, like, kind of town. It wasn't really a townhouse. It was a condo, but it had, like, a first-story entrance. But it was a very weird building. But either way, we lived in a pretty small place, you know? Like, I think our whole entire place is, like, maybe a little over 1,000 square feet. So it wasn't anything crazy like that. It was just a very kind of comfy condo, you know? But there was a lot of characters in this neighborhood when I was a kid. And directly below us, in the condo on the first floor unit, there was a family who I never knew their names. They lived there when I was very young, and they only lived there for a couple years because eventually they got raided, which we'll get to that. But I just remember growing up next to this household was like hell in a cell because the floors and the walls in this like condo building were extremely thin. You would hear anyone around you, and this couple loved to fight in front of their children for cigarette money. Very classy, I know. But eventually it escalated from them just arguing about cigarette money to now the wife or the baby, I doubt they were married. We're going to go with baby mama here. The baby mama would start coming over to our house and asking for cigarette money. Now, at first, it didn't work, you know? My mom wouldn't even answer the door. So I didn't really understand what she wanted until one day she showed up at me and my mom's house with her son. And we thought, like, oh, you know, I remember my mom opened the door because she thought, like, something was happening, like she needed something for her son. No. That clever little tweaker just came up with the ultimate finesse plan to get us to open our door. We open our door, of course, my mom opens it, and I remember I was pretty young at this point. I was very young, but I remember this so vividly, dude. I remember this woman, she had orange hair, my downstairs neighbor. She comes up the stairs, and when I was young, I didn't really recognize her as like a drug user or anything. Now that I'm older, yeah, this bitch did hella drugs, dude, for sure. I could probably serve her right now, but when I was younger, I just remember she was like the weird neighbor downstairs to me. But she came in with her son, and her son comes upstairs to my condo, right? And he walks in and just starts like playing with the fucking toys I got, dude. And I'm like, okay, that's a little rude, whatever. But I look over to his mom, my tweaker neighbor, And she has this appearance. She looks like a Saints Row character, essentially. She shaved off her eyebrows and tattooed them back on, which is probably one of the most mental things I've ever seen in my life. I don't know if I've ever seen anyone else do that, but she shaved off her eyebrows and tattooed them back on. She had face tats well before they were cool. She was covered in all sorts of tats, and she had a lot of, like, marks on her, which looking back at it, when I was young, I just thought like, oh, she must have fallen. Looking back at it, I believe it was probably a combination of drugs and also probably abuse, because the guy who lived in there, he was very loud when he got angry. I don't think he was a very good guy. So, but now, when I was a kid, I didn't recognize it like that. I look at this and I'm like, oh, funny tattoo eye woman, dude. Like, look at this, But growing up next to them really conditioned me to deal with my current neighbors. Because after a little while, I don't know what happened or like why this happened to them, but I just remember waking up in the middle of the night and my mom was looking out the window, and I woke up because I just heard all the banging and shit, and the SWAT team raided their fucking house. I'm not talking like a couple cops showed up. No, like the actual SWAT team raided their fucking house. That was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen at that point in my life. But also, it got me a little curious, and I actually brought up these neighbors recently to my mom while we were seeing each other for Thanksgiving this past year. She finally spilled the beans on them to me, because she wouldn't tell me this when I was a kid, and told me that apparently they were selling drugs out of the place or something, which is no surprise, considering this woman used to come over and ask for dope money pretty much every day, and use her kid to guilt us out of it. My mom would never fold. Actually, no. One time my mom gave her $5 just so she would leave, because we said no, and she started crying in the dining room. But, I mean, that was a mess. But either way, that conditioned me to deal with my current neighbors. Now, my current neighbors are a trip. For those of you guys who have followed me for a little while, you might know that I've lived in the house I currently live in for, I'd say, about 2 years now. Coming up on 2 years, and I've got like another year or so on my lease. But when I first moved into my current situation, I had a neighbor that was totally fine. Like, were they like outright tweakers? No. But did they smoke a little meth? Yes, they did. The reason I know this is because at one point, my ex-girlfriend who had lived with me went over to this house and said to me when she came back, like, yeah, they smoked tweak. Like, I saw them. Like, they had it on the counter, right? So I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. But you know what? They're cool people, and I wouldn't have known if you didn't tell me. I mean, I kind of had a hunch, but I wouldn't have known. But they're nice people. Eventually, they up and moved out, which made me very sad because they had this little outdoor cat who would come over and visit me all the time, and it was a blast. But at the same time, I figured, like, okay, maybe I'll get some normal neighbors now or something. Like, maybe I'll get the ones who aren't, like, smoking tweak when guests come over for the first time, So I'm getting pretty amped up. I'm like, okay, let's see if maybe I'll get a cool neighbor, bro. Like, what if I got a homie as a neighbor? Like, that would be sick, There was a brief period of maybe a week where no one lived next door to me. And then all of a sudden, I get new neighbors. Now, I'm not talking like 1 or 2 people. I don't really know how many people live in this house together, but I do know that at all times there is bare minimum 3 to 4 cars in the driveway. This is not a very huge house, but they have 2 driveways for some reason. It's kind of weird. It's like one on each side of the house. It's really weird. I don't know why they need 2 driveways, but whatever. I guess it's a stunt. So they move in, and there's a solid like 6 people minimum in this house, probably more, and it's not a very big house. But at first they seem very nice, they're just cool neighbors, they're minding their business, so I don't really have a problem with them at all. One day, I walk outside, and I'm going to do my errands for the day, and I notice that there's a lot of my new neighbors hanging out on the back deck and kind of around this little storage shed they had in back. Now, I didn't think much of it. I hopped in my car and I dipped. But when I came back, as I was pulling into my driveway, I have kind of a direct line of sight on their backyard. And in particular, I have a direct line of sight on what I like to call the Tweak Shack. Now, what I call the Tweak Shack is they have this little Home Depot like shed. Those ones you can go and buy out of the parking lot? They have one of those set up in their yard. I shit you not. All they did was put like a do not enter sign on the door, some Christmas lights around it, and immediately started hotboxing it with meth. Like going crazy, bro. These motherfuckers snap with the shit, dude. You can just tell. You can see, even from afar, you can tell when someone's smoking tweak. Because weed smoke doesn't move like that, right? Cigarette smoke doesn't move like that. Neither does vape smoke. I find that, at least from what I've seen, I mean, obviously I've never fucking smoked meth, but the smoke just moves differently, you know? It's very distinct. It's hard to describe, but I feel like when you see someone smoking that shit, you just know. Like, you don't have to see the pipe to know, like, oh yeah, dude, that's some tweak, right? But my suspicions were confirmed upon talking to them just a little bit later. About a week after this incident, you know, I didn't think much of it once again because it's their property, they're my neighbors, do whatever you want, right? But a week after this incident, I come outside of my house to run some errands, and one of them approaches me for basically the first time. Like, the day they moved in, we, like, said hey to each other, you know, they're like, oh, hey, like, how are you, you know, like, what's your name, that kind of thing, and they were nice, you know, but on this particular day, they approached me, and they're like, hey, like, would you be able to help me jump my car? Now, I didn't have any jumper cables at the time. They were asking if I had jumper cables. They were like, yo, do you have cables? Like, is there any way you could pull your car up and help me? I didn't have any cables, but I was about to go to Walmart. So I offered, I was like, yo, let me buy like a jumper pack and I'll be back. Give me like 30 minutes, you know? So he's like, dope, man, thanks. Now, this neighbor, I consider the head tweaker, right? The guy who asked me for the jumper cable, this guy has like a Gucci Mane style ice cream cone on his face. Very fire, along with a very wide array of other tattoos that are, they don't really have any like connection to each other at all. I feel like people with this many tattoos, you at least get some that maybe flow into each other visually. No, this guy has like an ice cream cone on his face and probably like a portrait of Sideshow Bob on his fucking calf. Like, who knows what kind of tats this guy's got that I haven't seen? Probably absolutely mental, because the ones I have seen are a trip. But I go to Walmart and I grab a jumper pack, you know, being a good neighbor, figuring, hey, I'll earn some points with my new neighbors, you know, we'll be cooler now. And I get back and I give him the pack. And I got one of those little rechargeable ones where it doesn't require two cars. So I didn't have to move my car to help him or anything. I was just like, yo, here you go, man. Like, go ahead and use it. Just give it to me when you're done. Like, you could just leave it in my mailbox or something, right? And he's like, dope, thank you. After that opened up like a world of opportunity. I came back out of my house a little bit later in the day, you know, and they were still out there chilling. And, you know, the dude approaches me, and we're going to call him Tony Tweaker. Tony Tweaker approaches me, and he's like, yo, like, thanks for the jumper kit, man. I appreciate that. I figure he's just coming to say thanks. I'm like, oh, hell yeah, dude. Like, no problem, man. You're welcome. You know, like, I'm glad I could help. You know, just trying to be a good neighbor here. The first thing that this guy offers me is immediately, he's like, hey, you want some K2? Now, I was taken aback by this statement. I was not expecting to be offered K2, and this guy didn't just offer a small amount of it. He's talking to me, and he's like, yeah, dude, I found like a couple pounds of K2 the other day. Now, hold the fuck on. You did not find a couple pounds of K2. That's like not how it works. You didn't just go in the woods and find someone's secret K2 farm, dude. Someone's secret synthetic farm. That's not how it works. It's synthetic, all right? So you must have robbed someone. Now, I'm not going to ask too many details on where it came from, pardon me, because I wasn't interested in it either way. But the fact that the first thing that Tony Tweaker says to me to thank me is that he's willing to give me a pound of K2 blew my fucking cranium open. And I was immediately intrigued by this guy. I was like, yo, what the fuck are these guys on? Like, why do you have a pound of K2? So I'm talking to him a little more, and I ask about it a little later in the conversation. I'm like, yo, so like, where the fuck did you get this K2? And he's like, oh, bro, I just had it, man. Like, I just found it. And I'm like, dude, okay. He's clearly not willing to budge on this topic, so I'm just going to leave that there. But eventually later on, we're talking a little bit about drugs. Because I was like, oh, you know, like, I don't do K2. So we had a brief conversation about stuff we do. And I was sharing with him, I was like, yeah, you know, I like my psychedelics. You know, I used to be kind of more into some other stuff, but now I mainly do psychedelics and I smoke a lot of weed. And he was like, oh, yeah, man, like, I can't smoke weed because I'm on, I don't know if he said parole or probation, but he was on something where he couldn't smoke weed. And he was like, yeah, like I smoke K2 and like I used to really be into ice, just very nonchalant, mind you. This guy, I could tell this guy was dedicated to the craft, and I respect the fuck out of it, right? I respect the fuck out of it. This guy's dedicated to the craft, and he's telling me a little bit about that. And I'm like, that's dope, man. This guy named damn near every drug under the sun that wasn't like a research chemical. This guy just started going crazy. He's like, oh, I used to be big into opiates and shit. And I asked him, I mean, if you might consider this a rude question, but with how wild this guy was, I figured it was pretty fitting. I asked him, I was like, have you ever tried heroin? He was like, yeah, man, I used to speedball a lot, but fuck that shit. Like, I don't like that shit anymore. Mind you, this guy is like maybe a few years older than me. I feel like I might be making it sound like he's a much older guy, but this guy is for sure still in his 20s. Later 20s than I, but still for sure in his 20s. Like, very young guy. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, I'm taken aback by this shit, dude. I'm like, yo, these guys are hardcore, bro. I like these neighbors because my neighbors on the other side of my house, right, on the right side of my house, were just dickheads. They're horrible. They complained because my lawn was 2 inches too long and got me a ticket one time. I fucking hate those guys. They're horrible. But these people, it became clear to me very quickly that as long as I let them have their tweak shed, they didn't really care what I did. And I loved that about them. So I grew to be very friendly with these neighbors. We still say hello to each other every time I leave the house. Great neighbors. But, I kind of got inspired to make this video by talking about the tweaker neighbors with some other people I know. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was kind of a little different. It was like a split story. We talked about the early life and the late life. But hey, hope you guys enjoyed this little video about my tweaker neighbors. Drop a like if you did. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out, gamers.